I've always wondered what would be the perfect pairing of the Pleasantview Townies. And is there such a thing as a perfect pairing? Did the developers have something in mind when they created these sims? Is there a reason why they have the same face templates? We all know and love these characters very much and have played an infinite number of alternative realities for these sims. So, if you were to start over with a blank slate, who would you pair with who? Who are the parents to which kids? And what are your favorite combinations? In this video, we are going to take a look at a few options that I have always wanted to try out, so get ready for some chaos. And we will end the video with my personal perfect pairing, because why not? Also, I'm using a lot of default clothing, hairs, and used new skins and face templates to recreate these townies in a brand new neighborhood. So I hope everyone is still recognizable, but rest assured, deep down they are still the same old Pleasantview townies with their exact characters and interests that I copied from the wiki. So if we would go by order in which they were created by the developers, we have Marissa Bandette and Benjamin Long, Brandy Letourneau and Goopy Gilsgarbo. Then we have Christy Stratton and Abhijit Dipies. And we have Andrea Hogan and Joe Carr. So if you take into consideration that they were created according to skin color, there is another set of 8 sims, 1 female, 1 male, with each of the 4 skin tones. And keep in mind that I've changed some of their skin tones slightly when recreating them in CAS in this neighborhood. So we have Sandy Brody and Kennedy Cox. We have Melissa Fancy, Comey Tellerman. Then we have Marilena Hamilton and Brandon Lillard. And Ivy Kapoor and Amin Sims. This means that there is 1 sim left because we have an uneven number, and that is Jan Tellerman, created with skin 1 and who wouldn't have a partner if we pair them by order of creation. Next in the townie pool are 8 teens, and for the teens there are also 2 sims, 1 male, 1 female, per skin color. We have Tasha Go, Alvin Futa, Ivy Tellerman, Randy London, Meadow Thayer, Orlando Santowski, Sophie Miguel and Ricky Cormier. Again, looking at their skin color, Tasha and Alvin are skin 1, Ivy and Randy are skin 2. Randy is very much Asian in my game now, but originally he was created with the plain skin 2. Then Meadow and Orlando have skin 3, and Sophie and Ricky are made with skin 4. But then for the kids, however, they suddenly stopped at 5, so we have 2 skin 1 children, 2 skin 2 children. Then with skin 3 we only have 1 sim, Marcia Brunick, and that's the last one, so we have no male child with skin 3 and no children at all with skin 4. So yeah, the part of me who likes things to be even and symmetrical is softly crying inside. So let's see what happens if we try and match these teens to the parents using the order in which they were created. So there are some things that I like about this setup and a lot of things that I don't like. For example, I can see Tasha as Marissa and Benjamin's daughter and maybe Alvin as Sandy's son, but Ivy as the daughter to Goopy and Brandy in my mind doesn't fit, and neither does Randy with Melissa and Comey. Then on the other hand, I really like the idea of Meadow being Abhijit's daughter, and Sophie with Andrea and Joe I can see, and even Ricky with Ivy and Amin. Those are the combinations that I kind of like, but Orlando, together with Marilena Hamilton and Brandon Lillard, I just don't see him as their son. And when it comes to the children, there's really no rhyme or reason to this combination. There are really so many other ways of looking at it, and one of those is looking at the face templates. So Alvin and Brandy Letourneau always have the same face template, and they would be perfect mother and son. I really like this combination. I think Alvin really could be Brandy's son. Then Randy and Andrea sort of have the same eyes. I don't think they actually have the same face template, but they do sort of have the same eyes. I can totally see for both of them that you could make their Asian ancestry a little bit more visible. So in this game, they both had a pretty big makeover. I made Randy's skin tone lighter and Andrea's a lot darker, so they're very different in this game. But in the original, I can totally see Andrea being like a single mother to Randy. So then we have the 5 Sims who each have the exact same face template, which is a lot in a neighborhood starting out with 30 Sims. So if you make the teen and the children brothers and sister, one of the adult Sims would probably be their mother, right? So I figured Melissa is closer to the kids in skin tone, so she might be their mother. Now Marilena had a bit of a makeover again in this neighborhood, so she's a little darker than she is originally. I can totally see Melissa and Marilena being sisters, but somehow I can also see them as a couple, so that would be kind of an interesting approach, I think. And looking at them now, I can also really see Melissa being like the older sister to Ivy. Yeah, I think that would be like a really cute family dynamic too. But I'm not supposed to start writing stories in this episode, so let's focus on the faces. Next one is Sandy Brody and Chloe Gonzaga. I can see Chloe being the daughter of Sandy. They sort of have the same mouth. I gave Sandy a slight makeover. I didn't change too much, but I made her jaw like a little less wide. Just because I made these Sims with actually a purpose in this town and I want them to have kids and I want to like the kids that they'll have. So I changed Sandy, Komei and a few others. But yeah, I can totally see these two being mother and daughter. Next up is Komei Tellerman and Brittany Parker, and the only reason I think she could be his daughter is because she has red hair. Brandon Lillard actually has red hair too, so you could change that in SimPE. And Jan Tellerman, just because she has the same last name as Komei Tellerman, could mean that she is his sister. Since I gave Komei a little bit of a makeover, he doesn't look that different from Jan, so they actually could be brother and sister in this game. Not sure about the original, but it's an interesting combination for sure. In a previous segment, I mentioned that I thought that Meadow could be an interesting daughter to Abhijit, and I'm growing more and more fond of this idea. I think even in looks, they look like father and daughter, depending on who the mother is, of course, but it could work. But even in character, I think it's... the way I view these Sims, I think it's a really interesting idea to make Abhijit Meadow's father. Yeah. In some of the playthroughs, Meadow always strikes me as someone with a little bit of father issues, and Abhijit dividing his attention between all the women in his life could maybe be the reason for that. So yeah, there you go, story. I couldn't help it, I'm sorry. But face-wise, they actually have sort of like the same droopy eyes and the downward eyebrows. The mouth could be like... she looks like him. I'm not sure what it is, but I think she looks like him. Then Tasha Go, she's always been one of my all-time favorites. And I think she looks like Marisa Bendet a little bit, but also I always thought that she looked a little bit like Brandon Lillard. So it would be interesting if Brandon and Marisa were actually a couple and Tasha could be their daughter. All in all, I think she looks more like Marisa than Brandon, really. So yeah. Next up is Orlando Santowski, and I think I mentioned that I didn't really like the parents that he got paired up with when you look at his skin tone. The only adult Sim that I can really see him being a son to is Christy Stratton. Not sure why, I just think they could look like mother and son. Or maybe even his older sister, that would be interesting too. He has the same face template as Ricky Cormier, but they are so different from each other. I think Ricky could really be Amin Sim's son. They do not have the same face template, but depending on who would be the mother, I think it could work. So if you pair the 4 of them together, that would actually make like an interesting family. So Ricky and Orlando would be brothers and Amin would be married to Christy. So there's an idea that I might try out in the future. And I want to sort of conveniently ignore that these 3 Sims have the exact same face template. They are so different in every other way that I had a hard time seeing them as brothers or cousins or anything else. So I did, since they have pretty visible noses, I gave a makeover to Benjamin and Kennedy. They have a little bit of a mix with 2 other face templates. Amin, I didn't really change that much about him. I kind of like this nose on him. So yeah, in this game they don't look as much the same as they do in the original. And then Komei, I just absolutely love this character. I always think it's a shame that when he has children, his children look a little bit awkward. And you can always see that it's a Komei child, even a few generations later. So in this game, I decided to give him a little bit of a softer face. So his facial features are a little bit toned down. I still think he looks like Komei a lot, even with the new hair and the new skin and everything, and he has glasses now. But yeah, I changed his facial features a little bit to make him a little bit softer on the eyes, so his kids would look a little bit better. So now that we've seen who the townies would end up with if we go by order of creation, skin color or face templates, let's ask these townies themselves who they are most attracted to. So I've built sort of this recording studio, or Big Brother house if you will, where all of the adult townies will live for a week, so we can see what relationships might develop. I'm using Mitch's version of Romantic Standards and the adjusted version of ACR to go with it, and I have given all of the townies very neutral turn-ons and turn-offs, so that won't really play a role in this. They have the interests that are stated on the wiki, so this way I think we are closest to somewhat of an objective experiment. And we're going to see which Sims these townies are attracted to. Oh, and before I forget, I wanted to really see who would be their perfect partner if all options were open, and who they would be drawn to naturally if they could choose anyone they wanted. So for the purpose of this experiment, I made them all bisexual. So let's see what happens. The design of this house is really simple. We have 8 bedrooms, all with 4 beds in them, nothing else, just a few places to sleep. Then we have the kitchen, and of course the hallway that will not be accessible because they cannot leave. On both sides of the kitchen are the bathrooms. Then we have a common dining area and a common living area, where there's only a few fun items like a stereo, pool table, a dartboard and a TV. And then last but not least is the romance room. This room will be locked, and we will try and see whoever wants to get in to relax on the bed. But mainly this room is reserved for potential crushes only. First, we are obviously going to let them enter this Big Brother house, and we are going to lock all of the doors behind them. We're actually going to delete all of the doors behind them and replace them with windows so they cannot get out. The only doors that will be there are the doors to the kitchen, and that will only be accessible to the server that is going to come in a few times a day to make them a meal. But other than that, nobody can get in or out of this house. In this house we can follow their every move for 24 hours a day, and we only have a few rules. I can only control them to go to sleep at night, go to the toilet in the morning and take a shower, and have their meals together in the dining room. Oh, and I can order them to get a coffee so that they won't fall asleep before the day is over. They can only move out of this house as a couple, and in order for them to qualify as a couple, they need a mutual crush. If they fall in love, that is a bonus, but all they need to move out of this house together with their preferred partner is a mutual crush. So let's see what these guys are up to and who will be the first to make it to the romance room. Things started out pretty slow with everyone getting to know each other. Andrea found the remote control to the stereo. Brandy and Amin seemed to be getting along at first sight. Christy and Joe Carr used the music as a thankful excuse to end their dead-end conversation by showing off some impressive moves. As more and more of the Sims in the room started dancing, the more shy Sims like Marilena and Kennedy were sitting in their own little corner by the TV, watching a movie, and Kennedy continuously judging the dancers. All in all, it was a pretty quiet start to this experiment, and we have yet to see who will be the first ones to start flirting or showing any romantic interest in one of the other Sims in this house. They will all be locked in here for 7 days, so we have plenty of time to see things unfold. As Marissa was showing her very special dancing skills off on the dance floor, Alyssa won her first game of pool and Marilena put the moves on Christy. But Christy, being as shy as she is, thought that was way too fast and way too soon and she rejected her, unfortunately. They are both family Sims, so it is no wonder that they are attracted to each other, so maybe Christy just needs a little bit more time. Around lunchtime, they had all built up quite an appetite and it was time for their first meal together as a group. A good opportunity to have some conversations and get to know each other a little bit better. And if you're wondering who the Sim serving the meals is, that is one of my other playables in this town who plays no role in this experiment, but who is used as a cook for this video. We will see her throughout this video as she is summoned into this building a few times a day to serve meals and clean up a bit after them. After their lunch, everybody moved back to the living room and they continued their dance party. They were already getting better at it. And even though I could watch these guys dancing for the entire day, we have a job to do, and that is to find out who is most attracted to whom. It is also around this time that the first fight breaks out, and there would be many more to come. I have no idea what happened there, but being in a cramped space for a prolonged period of time with company that you neither like nor chose to be with might do that to a person. And just like in most reality TV shows, the rest of these 7 days at this Big Brother house offered a lot, and I do mean a lot more fights. So therefore I decided, since all of the Sims seemed very irritable and this was going to be a thing, that whoever lost the fight had to apologize to the one kicked their behind. And I was allowed to order them to do that one action to make them apologize, because otherwise the rest of this video would consist of nothing other than constant fighting, and that would have been a whole other experiment altogether. The rest of the evening was spent calmly watching TV with no further incidents, neither romantic nor fight-wise. And at the end of the evening, they had dinner together in the common dining area, and it wasn't long before they were too exhausted to even pretend to be able to sit up straight. So I sent them all to bed and the first day ended there. The second day started with me sending everyone to the toilets and the showers and then having them all gather in the common living area again. And this is when I noticed that their continuous dancing was keeping them from really interacting with each other, so I took away their music. I was a little hopeful when I saw Marissa and Abhijit playing darts together, but I quickly realized that she wasn't attracted to him at all. Marilena and Christy were clearly very attracted to each other, but every time I saw them together, neither of them seemed to want to take the first move. Sandy wanted in on the darts game, Christy started complimenting Benjamin, someone found the remote to the stereo again, and Amin told Kennedy where to put it. And then we finally saw our first flirt. Benjamin had built up the courage to charm Ivy, and she seemed very much into it. Shortly after that, something happened that I really haven't seen in The Sims ever before, I think, at least not in this way. Brandon was like continuously trying to gross out Ivy. She just kept laughing at him. She thought he was funny, and he kept going and going and going, farting and making all the weird and obnoxious noises and smells and sounds and stuff. I thought it was funny. And then Benjamin swept in and kind of rescued Ivy from Brandon's company. They had a good conversation and they seemed to really get along. The left hallway organically developed into the place where Sims went who wanted to take things outside. And when I checked in on the dining area, I caught Jan flirting with Brandon, but he was appalled at her attempt and would have none of it. The second day went by without too much drama and intrigue, except for the fights of course. They just kept going. We did get a better view of likes and dislikes, and we especially got a nice peek at Komei's grouchiness, which is always a treat. To be fair, he did seem more prone to accepting kindness from Brandy, but somehow nice guy Benjamin appeared to have a proper grudge against him. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Kennedy floored Amin, Who would have thought? And when looking at Amin's relationship panel, I really worried about him. He was making more enemies than friends, and there seemed to be very little potential to find a partner the way he was acting. All the while, I was using the picture-in-picture camera more than I have ever done in my entire time of playing The Sims 2. It turned out to be a really useful tool to keep track of what happened in two places at the same time. The only other noteworthy thing that day was that Benjamin and Ivy seemed to seek out each other's company more and more. And they seemed to really be enjoying themselves when they were together. So after I had them all get a coffee and fill up their energy a bit, I started to inspect their relationship panels to see what they were really thinking about their temporary roommates. And I saw that Brandon and Marissa were talking to each other, which the idea of the two of them together I really liked. But it turned out that Marissa was mostly attracted to Kome, Kennedy and Joe. And Brandon was most attracted to Goopy and Abhijit, so that was probably not going to happen. And there seemed to be like a three-way thing between Christy, Marilena and Kome. They were all attracted to each other, and even though they did have good conversations, none of them actually made any moves towards the others. So I was curious to see if that was ever going to lead to anything if it were up to them. The second day ended again with everyone quietly watching TV together, and then I sent them all to bed, ending the second day. Their third day in this house started with the usual routine of toilets, showers and their morning coffee, and as they're sitting there seemingly unbothered by the events to come, I want to take the opportunity to comment on my choice of the blue carpet and the blue couches. You might have been surprised or even appalled that I used them in this video, but when I was building this lot, it somehow really felt appropriate to use it as sort of a tribute to the Sims franchise, and especially The Sims 1, where my love for this game started. The blue royal carpet and the blue couches have been around forever, and even though I was in love with them all those years ago, and I put them in almost every household in The Sims 1, I never use them anymore, and for a good reason. Because they are a bit outdated, and much prettier furniture and carpets are available to us all. But I thought they deserved some love, so I decided to use them for this video. So yeah, tell us in the comments what are your thoughts about the blue carpet and the blue couches. Does it make you nostalgic or just nauseous? Let me know. So moving on to the events of the third day, where we are finally going to see some action. I was happy to see Benjamin and Ivy spending more and more time together, and just as I was checking out their relationship scores, they made a run for the romance room, which was of course locked. So they suddenly let me know that they were not amused by that. I quickly gave the both of them a key and added in a new rule. Whenever I would catch a sim yelling at the door of the romance room, angry that they couldn't get in, and I could identify who they were trying to get into the room with, I would give the both of them a key. This way, heightening the chances of crushes developing and speeding up the process of forming couples. As I was doing this, I suddenly heard the sounds of someone developing a crush. So, rushing to the living room, I found out it was Kome getting a crush on Marilena, but it wasn't mutual. All of a sudden, everything started happening at once, and I was taken by surprise by suddenly not knowing where to point the camera, after 2 days of thinking nothing was ever going to happen without me meddling. Luckily, these Sims are very capable of being in charge of their own romantic actions, so I was a little less worried this experiment would lead to 17 sad and lonely Sims who would do nothing but beat each other. As per usual, I pointed the camera away when Benjamin and Ivy decided to take things to the next step. But I watched just long enough to see that Benjamin did develop a crush on Ivy, but it wasn't mutual yet, so anything could still happen. Meanwhile, in the living room, another fight broke out and Kennedy was competing to become the ultimate fighting champion, and impressing absolutely nobody while doing so. Now, all of this happened before it was even breakfast time on Wednesday, and a few moments later, during their first meal of the day, I saw that Abhijit expressed his wishes to make use of the romance room too. Of course, he couldn't stay behind, being notorious for his romancing ways, but it wasn't quite clear to me immediately who he was trying to use the room with. Until I saw him flirting with Sandy, and I knew that I had missed my chance. So I regretted not catching them in time, but there would be other chances, I was sure of it. With the both of them being romance Sims, things were bound to happen. Later that day, I found Sandy flirting with Brandon, but after having watched Andrea give a beating to Brandy, Benjamin showing Jan who's boss, another fight going down in the bathroom, and Christy giving in to some of Marilena's attempts to get closer to her, I realized that Benjamin and Ivy were almost exclusively spending time with each other. They had little to no interest in the other Sims anymore, and they had developed a mutual crush. I didn't see it, but they did. So they were going to be our first real couple. And with that conclusion, I decided to move them out into the real world. After everyone had said their goodbyes, I realized Marissa and Anin were trying to get into the romance room. So I rearranged some keys and I saw Abhijit and Sandy flirting again. And then it was time for all of them to get some dinner. Kennedy kept bragging about winning all of his fights. Brandy and Comey engaged in some chit-chat about the weather, which they both did not seem to enjoy. And after dinner, they all had their evening coffee, which allowed me to check out their attractions until something more exciting happened. By the end of the third evening, Sandy and Abhijit were both clearly headed to the romance room, so I gave them both keys and they made good use of that. We probably all know where this is going, so let's skip to the part where we can see whether they got a crush on each other or not. And although Sandy did have a crush on Abhijit after this, Abhijit did not have a crush on Sandy in return. So the third day ended with them both falling asleep in the romance room and me sending all of the other Sims to their single beds. From the fourth day on, things started to really progress more quickly and crushes were popping up all over the place. The first thing Abhijit did in the morning was find Sandy and start flirting with her, and they kept flirting back and forth the entire day until they did both have a mutual crush. So I thought that was really cool. Most of their next days in this house consisted of really repeating the routines of the first few days. They would gather in the living room. It was getting more and more visible who they liked and disliked spending their time with. I organized the morning and evening coffees next to the group meals that they had. And somewhere during those days, two Sims would start openly flirting with each other or sneaking out to the romance room to have some privacy. So for the second half of this experiment, we are just going to jump to the most interesting events and couples moving out together, because at the end of this video, I also want to show you my favorite couples for this new neighborhood, and I do not want this to become a 2-hour video. I can really recommend trying out an experiment like this though. It was really fun to do, just letting them all loose in this house, seeing what they're up to, getting to know their quirks and repeated behaviors. This way you can really get to know them before actually moving them into their houses. And it's a nice way of populating your neighborhood with couples instead of single Sims. So if you're planning or thinking about starting a brand new neighborhood, this could really be a fun way to start it. So moving back to the test subjects in this Big Brother house, I had noticed Marissa and Kennedy spending more time with each other, and it looked like they were really enjoying their chat together. Until Goopy interrupted the both of them, slapped Kennedy, and it was time to get their breakfast. So it seemed that somewhere during that chaos in the living room, Christy and Marilena, the couple that I had been rooting for since the beginning, had found each other in the romance room. There was no mutual crush yet, but there was still time for that. And the funny thing is, they're both very shy, so every time they saw a fight break out in the living room, they would rush to the hallway. So it's like they fled into each other's arms, which I thought was kind of cute. In the meantime, and while the fights in the living room kept going, Comey and Andrea had heated arguments, and I couldn't figure out if they hated each other or just really liked having their discussions, and it was more like a love-hate relationship where they like weirdly enjoyed their bantering or something. So before Thursday ended, I decided to move out Abhijit and Sandy, who had by now developed a mutual crush and seemed to lose more and more interest in the others and started to act more and more like a couple in love, seeking each other's company at every opportunity. So I thought it was more than right to move them out and let them start their lives in the real world. As I was moving the desk and computer into Marissa's inventory so the Sims wouldn't spend their time playing games, I noticed Jan and Melissa wanting to go into the romance room. So I rearranged some keys again and I was curious to see what Friday would bring. With only 3 more days to go and 13 single Sims, one of them was bound to end up alone, and I had no clear view on who the other couples would be yet. Friday started out a bit chaotic because I didn't plan things very well, so everyone was still in their PJs when Comey and Andrea took up their bantering again, and I was still guiding everyone to their showers or morning coffee when I noticed that Jan and Melissa were sneaking away together. So I continued with ordering all of the test subjects to get some coffee. Having them energized and all in one room again would be a nice starting point for the last phase of this experiment. I was happy to see Marissa and Amin spending more time together, but somehow she just didn't seem all that into it. And then she very dramatically reminded me that it was time for breakfast. But before I could summon in the chef to make them a meal, my attention was drawn to the romance room where Jan and Melissa, who are blurred out right here, had gotten more comfortable together. After their rendezvous before breakfast, I checked their relationship panel and only Jan had gotten a crush on Melissa, not the other way around, so we did not have our next couple yet, but this was very promising. As I watched them having their omelets, I was happy to see that Maritza and Amin had found a place at the table close to one another. And I was surprised that Goopy, being so much of a romance sim, had played such a small part in this experiment until now. We've hardly even seen him, even though there are a lot of Sims that find him attractive, and I would have expected him to flirt way more than he did until now. I tried to make sense of their conversations at the breakfast table, but I couldn't really figure out what Brandy seemed to want, why Brandon kept rejecting every attempt for a flirt or an admiration, and if Christy and Marilena were ever really going to be a thing, or maybe one of them would just give up and go for Comey, and why Andrea and Joe, who had only one bowl together, seemed to be in each other's vicinity or having a good conversation every time I looked at them. But after breakfast, a lot of interesting things seemed to be happening at once. Melissa and Jan were having a really romantic moment right there in the common dining area, and I have to say this is a couple I have never thought about, but now that I've seen it, I think they are such a cute match. So in a new playthrough, I would probably match them together. And with Melissa dipping Jan and really letting her know that she was into her, they finally got their mutual crush and I sent them out of this house. I really didn't feel like wasting more time after they had made their decision, and since I had seen that a mutual crush usually meant that they would only have eyes for each other after that and lose all interest in everyone else in the house, I just moved them out. As usual, everyone rushed to the computer, and while the others were still waving and saying their goodbyes and doing their thing, I noticed Brandon and Goopy sneakily escaping to the romance room together. And in all honesty, this really made me laugh, and I had not seen that one coming. So they had their short moment of romance, and after that, they immediately both developed a crush on each other. So I hadn't even turned off the computer yet, and while everyone in the hallway was starting new fights again, I sent Goopy to the computer and moved out him and Brandon. And then it was back to only 9 Sims, and the question of whether Andrea and Joe were just being good friends or something more was developing. By the end of the afternoon, Amin was trying to impress Andrea, and it looked like he was succeeding. Kennedy had joined Marissa at the pool table, but she left him to play with himself and started talking to Brandy. Kennedy was very pleased with himself and seemingly detached from the others around him. And then Comey barged in and started picking an unnecessary fight with Andrea again. What was his deal? She walked away to silently cry, and that seemed to be the end of whatever there was between them, or whatever there seemed to be between them at the beginning. And then something happened. Kennedy decided to take action and told Marissa, "You are the one that I want to leave this house with. And there would be lots of success and fortune in their future." Marissa responded in a very charming and elegant manner. Who needs romance when you can have money? Which very quickly ended in a mutual crush. Kennedy then again started bragging about winning all of his fights in the house. And apparently Marissa was impressed. Or at least not too much annoyed about it. I guess it doesn't always have to be that complicated. So they qualified as a couple and I moved them out. Or at least that's what I was going to do when I was suddenly interrupted by the camera switching over to the romance room again. Apparently, Andrea had made herself comfortable on the bed there, and for a second I actually thought Komei might be the one to come in and join her. But it was Joe. Good old reliable Joe. Joe Carr, Andrea Hogan, Komei Tellerman, Kennedy Cox and Marissa Bandette are all fortune sims, and since we have taken turn-ons and turn-offs out of the equation, Sims attractions are mainly based on their aspirations and characters in this house. And since these are all townies created by Maxis, every sim with the same zodiac sign has the exact same character traits. So Joe and Kennedy are Scorpios, Marissa is a Gemini and Andrea is a Capricorn. Even though they are all fortune sims, Joe and Andrea have been getting along with each other since the beginning, even though they had only one bolt. Andrea and Komei were much more attracted to each other, but could not get through a single conversation without it ending in an argument. And Marissa only had eyes for Kennedy, although at first I thought she would absolutely go for Amin, who is a popularity sim and a Leo. Apparently Leos and Gemini are closer to each other in character than Geminis are to other fortune sims. I'm still a tiny bit sad that she did not go for Amin, because I would have really loved the two of them together. But instead, Marissa left the house together with Kennedy, and not long after that, Joe and Andrea also left the house as a couple, leaving only 5 more single sims behind. It was almost like Christy and Marilena finally felt more comfortable around each other now that not everyone was watching them anymore. They had this cute and cozy looking breakfast together, which looked really nice. And I really thought that things would start to look more romantic for them from now on. They had their coffee together in the living room. And not long after that coffee, Marilena's attempts to romance Christy were finally looking more successful. But just like every time before, once things got a little bit romantic, someone would either interrupt them or one of them would get distracted. So this time, Amin interrupted them and Christy walked off and started playing pool. And I was starting to believe that it would just never happen for them. And Christy would just have to find her fun in other activities, or maybe even form a connection with one of the other sims left in the house. We already know that she runs for cover when other sims start fighting, so when Amin attacked Komei for the gazillionth time, I found her striking up a conversation with Brandy in the dining room. After Amin had left the fight and joined them in the dining room, Christy tried to either cheer him up or calm him down a bit, but he responded as irritable and as grumpy as he had been for this entire week, and he rejected her, probably losing the few chances he still had for a mutual crush and the only possibility of leaving his house with anyone, which at this moment I think he realized. Now the two girls on the other hand, they started flirting with each other, but much like Christy did with Marilena at the beginning, she rejected Brandy. She probably didn't feel comfortable enough and she actually went running back to Marilena, so later that afternoon they did finally have some romantic moments and Marilena got a crush on Christy. From that moment on, it was like Christy really lost all of her inhibitions and finally could give in to Marilena. They couldn't keep their hands off of each other after that. They were the only couple that left the house after not only having a crush, but also falling in love. So I was really happy to see this couple leave together. As you might have guessed, in the end, even Komei and Brandy ended up together, but I really doubt that they were each other's first choices. And it was never like they were the most romantic couple ever, but they are also not the most unlikely couple ever. So in the end, when all other company had left and they were all by themselves, well, except for Amin, they really did develop a mutual crush and I moved them out together. And it might be a bit sad, but also completely makes sense after picking nothing but fights with everyone else in the house. Amin ended up alone. So before the week was even over, everyone had formed couples in this house. So let's take a look at what the family bin looks like if we were to use this Big Brother studio experience as a start to populating a new town. We started out with Ivy and Benjamin, who immediately got along together. Then Abhijit Bipies and Sandy Brody, the romance sims. Melissa Fancy and Jen Tellerman, who really found each other here. A really unexpected pairing for me, but I really like them together. And then Brandon Lillard and Goopy Gills Carbo, who I never even saw having a conversation before they suddenly sneaked off to the romance room together and immediately had a mutual crush. Then Kennedy Cox and Marissa Bandette, who seemed to be really into other people and other things before they actually did start flirting together and ended up together. Joe Carr and Andrea Hogan, still an interesting couple to me. They seemed more like really good friends, talking and joking all the time, but eventually they did fall in love, or at least they developed a crush. Marilena and Christy, it took them a long time. They had an immediate attraction, but neither of them really took any steps towards the other right up until the end, until most of the other sims had left and they had the area to themselves. And then Komei and Brandy, who, when everyone else had left, found each other. So all in all, some really interesting families to start a new neighborhood with. Now, the biggest reason for making this video was that I needed a new neighborhood with some interesting sims to start a new project that I've been working on for a while now. So here are my choices for the sims that I wanted to populate this neighborhood with. Starting out with my all-time favorite, Tasha Go, as a daughter to Marissa Bandette and Benjamin Long. And if Marissa and Benjamin would have more children in the future, this is what Tasha's brothers and sisters would look like. Marilena Hamilton and Brandon Lillard, an unlikely but charming couple and an example of opposites attract, although I doubt that they will find keeping their relationship harmonious will be easy for them. I paired them with Marcia Brunick as their daughter, who I will obviously rename later on, as I will do for most of the sims in this video. And here are Marcia's brothers and sisters. Then I used a combination of Sandy Brody with Chloe Gonzaga as her daughter, which I really liked in the beginning, and I needed a father to go with that, so I gave Kennedy and Chloe the same skin color, and I really like how the final result of this family turned out. I can totally imagine this household being one where the occasional plate is thrown around in a passionate discussion. And looking at Chloe's brothers and sisters, somehow some of them really do look like her. And somehow this version of Sophie Miguel is my favorite version ever. I think she looks so much better with the darker skin and I'm just completely in love with that sweater. Andrea is looking sophisticated as always, and Joe just always strikes me as the reliable good guy. So I think he looks like that in this version too. Together I just really love them as a family. So let's see what their kids would look like if they would have more children. I paired Christy with Abhijit just because he seemed like the most fitting father for Orlando, and I didn't know what other townie to choose as his father, if I had to choose from the other Pleasantview Townies. This will, however, be a very interesting family dynamic, I think. Christy and Orlando are both Cancers, and hopefully their harmonious and non-confrontational nature will be what holds this family together. Because there's a twist. We all know Abhijit is a romance sim who usually has multiple relationships with the women in his life, and I really wanted to have him as a father to Meadow too. So he will be having an affair with Jan Tellerman to accomplish that, and also solving the issue where I didn't know where to place Jan in this setup. So this will now be a perfect explanation for Meadow's blonde hair. This will also make Orlando and Meadow half brother and sister, and I really like that combination. So these would be Orlando's potential brothers and sisters, and some of them I think actually really do look like him. So it's really interesting to see that and to look at the game from that point of view. She really does look like him a lot, I think. And then there's also Jan. So if Abhijit were to have more children with Jan, this is what they might look like, and they would be Meadow's brothers and sisters. There's not really much of a resemblance to Meadow, I have to be honest about that, but there are some kids in there that I really like the looks of. Next up are Brandy, who I renamed to Brenda for reasons I will explain in one of the next few clips. And I just had to pair her with Alvin because of them having the same face template. They look so much alike that I just had to make them mother and son. I also think Alvin looks so much better than he used to in his new clothes and hair, so I'm actually really interested to see how his life is going to be in this new world. He needed a father, and Goopy is hard to match with anyone, only judging by looks. So here we are. I hope Brandy will forgive me. I really see her as this strong and rational, make things happen kind of person, and next to her, Goopy looks even more lazy and privileged than he used to. So I'm really interested to see how their relationship is going to develop. I was actually worried that their faces wouldn't be compatible enough to make interesting looking children, but I was pleasantly surprised. Call me Tellerman and Melissa fancy. It's really only because of the face templates of the three children and Chandler's red hair that I paired these two together. Looking at this family, it does sort of look like they belong together somehow, so I do kind of like this combination. Oh, and I might have renamed this Orlando to Oliver again, since I've gotten so used to that name that I completely forgot his original name wasn't Oliver, but it was Orlando. I'm not sure what to think of these guys yet, and if Melissa will stay faithful, but if they have more children in the future, this is what they will look like. With only 4 more families to go, we arrived at Ricky Cormier's household. I figured his parents should be Ivy and Amin, not only because of their skin color, which again I made much darker in this neighborhood, but also because I see Ricky as somewhat of a rebel, and somehow him having Amin as a father just matched that image. And also Ivy, as sort of a free-thinking, active and playful knowledge sim, fit right in as his mother. I'm just absolutely loving Ricky's new piercings here, and I'm really excited to play this family when we arrive at that point in the challenge. I think that both of them having relatively long faces make them less compatible with other sims, but together they do make some reasonably looking kids, although I expect that Ricky will always be the sibling with the good looks. The last three families are technically not all Pleasantview Townies. For those of you that have seen my video about the game rules of my neighborhood Simsville, you might recognize Randy's new parents. I really like them so much that I just had to have them here as his parents do. The father shares Randy's face template and I think the mother has Mary Sue's template. But the fun thing about extracting character files and recreating the Sims in CAS is that you can make them look however you want them to look. So I really tried my best to make them look as Asian as I think they were supposed to be. Korean, to be specific. I obviously also renamed them, but we'll get to that once we start the new series. And with Randy's new parents, I feel like there is finally a way to give Randy siblings that will actually look like him. So I'm really looking forward to when that happens. Then the only child that was left without parents is Brittany Parker. So what I did here was I created a single mom for her. The only other combination would be pairing her with Gome, but that would mean she would have to be like Chandler's half-sister, and I didn't want to do that, so here's Brittany Parker with her mom. And the last family in this list is sort of a bonus couple. If you look closely, you might already recognize them from a distance. It's Brandy Broke and John Burp together. I've always really wanted to try out these two Sims as a couple, and from what I've seen so far, they make the most beautiful babies. So I'm really excited that we get to see those in this new world, where they will live as Brandy and John Montgomery. Which is also why I had to rename Brandy Letourneau to Brenda. And I kinda think Brenda is more fitting for her anyway, so I'm really happy about that change. So that was it for this little experiment with Pleasantview Townies. I hope you liked the video. Do share with us in the comments what your favorite combinations or couples are, and if you've made any pairings that made your playthrough particularly fun or interesting. We will be seeing these couples in an upcoming series on this channel, but there will be a twist to that. When we meet them, their children will not be born yet, and they will be too busy surviving to even think about romance that much. So for now, I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!